Hello everyone. Today's talk is titled Dance with the Beautifully Insane. And so when we look at this life, we find many things. We find that we are perceiving people who are making great sense and people who are not making great sense. And so what is our valuation of everything in this term, in this context? You begin to see that there's been this story of this guru in India. And this guru in India, this very dull kid comes up to him. And so it's like one of his disciples is one of these people where he's putting his whole being to help is this kid who is very dull, you know. You know, the concept of gurus is kind of, I don't want to say flawed, but maybe not culturally as serene as it was before. You know, a guru is not just a term for some guy who's something. This is a being who's putting his whole being, he's putting his whole life force into bringing you into a same place of realization. And so that same place of realization is actually a place that it's an observance. So he's trying to give you observance. He's not teaching you anything. He's not promising you anything. He's here to just make you become observant to yourself in a way where you recognize what is here and now more unspeakably, more experientially, directly. So this guru gets this disciple, and it's this kid who's he's not a bright kid, you know, he's a very, very stupid kid actually. So this disciple has this kid who is not wise at all, and as this kid comes, he tells the kid, "Hey, hold my clothing for a second, and don't put them on the ground." You know, while you know back in the day, I think they took showers in ponds. You know, so anyways, the guy comes back and sees the kids throwing the clothing on the ground or something, you know. And so even a simple task like that has not even gone exhausted. So how can greater tasks and greater words be even understood? So the guru is faced with a challenge here. How can, without words, he communicate this, right? So he begins to see that his other disciples come and he has to go attend somewhere. Suddenly, for a second, he just tells this kid, write the holy words, you know, the words of, you know, Rama or whatever the words were, you know, the sayings. So as the kid begins writing. He has a pencil or something, it's on a stone or it's on something, and he begins writing, right? So the guru leaves for a second because other disciples, there's some havoc happened or a fight or whatever, and he's going there to check it out, and suddenly after a couple hours, he realized, oh my God, this kid's still writing. So he runs back and he sees this kid has just simply been continuously writing to the point that the pencil's destroyed and his nails are going into the ground, right? And it's a kind of chaotic scene, but this guru suddenly understands that this being is realized. Not in the sense that it's as if there were no ideas to bother him, and regardless of his ability, he was an able expression. The guru runs up and just hugs this kid, you know, and so it's as if sincerity was always there. It's as if the kid always knew, regardless of his mind. The being knew. The being had a devotion to continue in this form of existence. When you see that, that is true. That is true. That is the true ability of humanity. Not superpowers and stuff they have in comic books. The true ability of the human being is to confront reality to its core. In other words, the yogi is the new superhero in a world that is too caught up in noise. And so the moral of the story, and the point I'm sharing it, is that that kid, that dull kid, grows up to become one of the greatest poets in India, you know. And it's very fantastic because it shows that it is not really how smart or how much you think you know it right now in an external sense that matters. It's about how aware you are of the intensity and clarity of your existential expression. You are a moment of being. You are a presence. You're not just some physical body moving without any effect. You're connected to things in ways beyond your understanding, and that is why there's a greater connection to things. You're not here to constantly bring linear stories into your mind based on fixed senses of space and time. History is great imagery to work with, but not because we are not in their experience of space and time. We were not there perhaps in Gandhi's eyes, in Martin Luther King's eyes, when their speeches were being done, and it's as if they were timeless, they were spaceless. These beings spoke because life spoke. And so that is the authenticity we need. When you begin to see, gosh, what is the quality of my living? You don't enhance it by assuming you're the same problem and going. You never, don't begin from the problem. Observe the problem and deconstruct it, and the answer was always there. Because some problems are irrelevant and in a sense are just imagery trying to be your leader in regards to showing you what is real. It's very funny, man is never, your being is never convinced, by the way. That is why we're not satisfied with our simple theories. That is why when you know, one person heard an answer to what the cosmos is, he's like, okay, let me just check it myself too, you know. And so there was another view on the universe, you know. So we're so many beings right now observing, you know. It's you know, the beings who are able to appreciate their existence are the ones that are thriving beyond the game dynamic of, is this the right action or is this the wrong action? It's just that this is the presence of the moment, and the moment is aware. And so it's as if like mindfulness is after doing it so many times, you begin seeing you just had to have mindfulness in your nature, just awareness to the possibility that beyond the spectrum, there is presence. When I say beyond the spectrum, there's presence, you begin to see, wow, spirituality was not about mainly the known factor. It was about the unknown factor of man's being. It's where philosophers reached the edge but did not decide to go through. It's as if all the human being scientists do not even want to go close to that part of the forest. Do you know? Philosophers got close in abstraction and they're like, okay, maybe perhaps it comes from this origin, but they were still trying to be an individuation. It was only the mystic, the yogi, who sat down, who went into the Himalayas. And back then, guys, there was, imagine you're just in some vast nature where every second an animal can come and kill you. So they had to work with the intelligence of their presence. It didn't matter their ideas at that point. In other words, they had to be graceful. They had to see that they were not more than the beings that were present there. Because if they thought they did, they would be carrying an unnecessary weight, which it will be felt by others. So what that means is, it does not mean you should, fear is not something that is in your hands. It comes and goes because you're an individual form and you're working with the form. It's how you're handling your fear that's very important. And how you're handling your fear should be just like how a pond handles a rock if it's thrown at it. Regardless of how angry you throw a rock at the pond just remains in its peace. So that is the mindfulness in nature which man requires to then become his own greater explorer. When you see and when you really look at what the concept dance with the beautifully insane means, guys, that whole story about that kid who just had such sincere devotion in doing an action, in existing, it's like he was just such a being who had such a devoted action towards life. In other words, it's as if it's like okay, I don't want to even carry an idea. It's that compassion to a point where you are even letting your idea be free. Many people think that ideas are just ideas. No. They have a relevance. They are a space. They are a movement in which worlds are ignited, and these worlds are immediately taken into different senses of abstraction. So what that means is you are in a river, and so the river is not your imagination. It's just the flow of the river is just coming, and you're experiencing many different ideas, many different concepts. You're like, wait a minute, oh my God, this idea looks like the same inspiration that perhaps this guy had, and your mind begins seeing that all these people you don't know, which you're creating based on how detailed their lives are written, are immediately becoming absorbed in a way where you're not even defining them, but they're naturally being defined. So it's having the trust in the river, and when you have trust in the river, it's like you do not become the confusion of thinking, oh gosh, am I the river or not? You know you're an individual being within a dynamic process. Do you know? It's as if that moment where you've stood still and the whole river of duality is just coming at you, you remain still in a knowing that is untouched. The concept of untouched means that there are aspects of you where no one can define to even judge. There are aspects of you which they are not even shaped. They're just observances, they're just views. They're forms of knowing based on how you are present through multiple spaces at the same time. These spaces begin as linear ideas because that's how we're trying to figure it out right now. We cannot ignore how language is approaching reality, you know. But in seeing it, we begin seeing that we also have our own existential interpretation. We must realize that we need to create clarity in mind. Clarity in mind means we must observe the moment as it is. So regardless of how much I feel clear that I have understood something in one room, the minute I walk out of that room, oh my God, I don't know anything. Because man is a multidimensional being, and for one reality to create the certainty for all realities, it is impossible. Only the certainty of its being is possible. So that's how that sense of possibility, it really shows you that it is a simultaneous presence. So simultaneous realities are something that Mr. Within would like to playfully begin introducing to just people. And so what that means is that we have been thinking we're just this, and we've been thinking this so much, but at the same time we've been observing what we've been accepting. So what that means is if you suddenly don't accept to, for example, update your technology, it doesn't mean you don't have an understanding of the new technology. You know, the minute a new technology comes, everyone's just got a new branch of understanding. Anytime a new concept is said, the eyes of man are extended. And so novelty is the profoundest moment. And so when you see, for example, that person who is it's as if they are not logical, they are not rational, they are not anything. It's as if the way I've seen some very spiritual people behave is that their trust in life was the miracle. Just the intensity of the knowing that this being had beyond thought. You can see it in beings' eyes. You can see it in your eyes. Because sight was never disconnected. It was only the individualizations, the objects of sight, that brought the disconnection, that made it individual. So what that means is that unity never left, and neither did individuation. And you're not an individual. And what that means is like how much you tell me that, oh, I'm this guy, I did this thing, that thing. There have been moments in your life where you have stood still and you have seen all life is alive. Do you know what I mean? It's moments of existential association beyond form and thought. And when you have that as a being, compassion comes, and this compassion, it's its own faith, it's its own hope. It's just like, how would I say it? Your view on life shows you that there is no failure because there is no duality. You begin becoming a very transparent idea, and that is how you remain. That is how clarity becomes an awareness in how you are kept based on your ideology and also the observance beyond it. So that spiritual man who, for example, let us actually go into ancient Persia and where there were dervishes. And so who were dervishes? These were beings who they went in a sense, I would like to say now, towards the Sufi path of love. They were beings who went into states of ecstatic union, in the sense that by bringing forth all objectivity, all acknowledgement of self, and spitting into just being your knowing is no longer in your idea. And this is simply it, because we think that we have our ideas. If someone shakes your physiology, your ideas will suddenly shake and your reception will fall. Reality, the way we like it and are comfortable with, the way people are seeking happiness, that's a certain state of view. But you don't want to just be in a certain state of view. You want to be that observance of everything. And this observance of everything, it's like going from a want as an idea to then just watching things and dissolving into what you've been all the time. So again, back to that concept in which union is your presence. So guys, you as a human being have been conditioned to see yourself as a sense of self. As you observe the sense of self playfully and compassionately and with depth, you begin seeing that one of the greatest ideas that you know was your idea. It's just that you never saw more in yourself because you did not look past a certain experience which communicated a certain belief which you socially maybe took, and that's why you don't want to take it. You must realize there are different dimensions. If you do not acknowledge it as it is, then it's like you're perceiving an illusion in the world, but you're like, gosh, why isn't my illusion working? Why isn't my law of attraction working? Law of attraction does not mean it's your law of attraction. Law of attraction means that the flows are going where they're going. And so it is you, again, as the stillness within the movement of the greatest rivers in this cosmos. A vision of all that can be. So we need to observe these ideas. That wild man, that whirling dervish who suddenly began whirling and just going into his more ecstatic, observant experience, it was as if seeing more than an idea move a human being. When you see that it's as if it is beyond the idea of that human being, it's just a fabulous phenomenon, you know. Speaking of dervishes, I also went to this, they have these traditional instruments and they played in these dervish, like, I guess, seminars or concerts. And so I go to this one where they were actually reading also mystical poetry as well. You know, there was a guy talking about it. And so in this thing, there's this one drummer, and so they're a group, you know, everyone has a different instrument, but there's this one drummer, and it's this guy who, you look at his face, you think he's like, he listens to metal on a daily basis, but he's just sitting there, and he's just so comfortable, and just, he's hitting the drum. Suddenly, as the whole five people were playing in the concert, suddenly four of them stopped their things, they stopped playing, and suddenly it's like the drum guy is suddenly left in his own solo, and they see it's as if the four guys recognize that this guy was going into an altered state. So when we looked at the guy on stage was playing the drums, his eyes was closed, his hands were moving at an intensity of speed beyond that you would see. So it's as if he was tuning into a rhythm, and so he was just playing the most insane drum solo that you would hear while his eyes are closed, and he's just moving, you know. And it was such an ecstatic movement of life. It was like seeing a co-creation beyond the limited. And so as you begin, as I saw this actually, it was very insane, and you know, all the people in the crowds were like, oh, something's happening here, you know. And I'm like, yeah, the speed of the drum playing is getting faster. But it was a very powerful scene, and the guy suddenly, after like 10 minutes of intense playing in rhythms, where it's like you would look at his hands and you wouldn't be able to see his fingers because both of his hands were moving so fast on this drum thing he had, you know. So it was just insane. And so there is something in reality or in your normal day life that is always profound. And if you ignore the profound qualities, if you ignore the new things that are happening to you, and if you ignore the things that have happened before, and if you cannot acknowledge all of these in one moment comfortably, you will see that you are unnecessarily letting yourself get depressed and stressed. You know, that's not symptoms of a healthy mind. You know, we must have such healthy vision where internally actually our self-talk becomes very silent and our perception of reality becomes clear. So actually, instead of seeking our own self-talk as we've been conditioned, we are suddenly changing into beings who are stopping everything and in silence, listening to their environment become part of like that kind of self-talk. In other words, if you thought you were a body, your whole life, and you had a mind, it's as if you are a mind, and this is just simply a body manifestation of it. You are a greater observance of existence, and this is the simple manifestation of it. It's very important how you align the imagery that is in a sense keeping you real for yourself. Just observe it, observe reality, and don't let anyone tell you that you don't need to look at yourself. You observing the self is the most important thing. That is simply where your success comes from, actually, not from a lot of other people. You must just observe and study how you were born, into reality and realities after on, study the different changes, different experiences in your life. And suddenly you see, gosh, your incapabilities are coming because you have not paid a deep observance and deep attention to certain occurrences that that overwhelmed you at certain times, Instead of going the long way route of constantly asking questions from different realities, was I this person, was I that person, was I this, was I that? Instead of going for a story, just being aware of the fact that the story is present and that the storyteller is the greatest experience of the character. So it's not that we want to just call it God or we want to call it the greatest understanding that our sciences can find. It's all about how we are letting ourselves flow with all that is flowing in the present. Because, guys, there's different ways of saying the word present. There's one where, as if you're in class and they're like, "Are you present?" And there's one where when someone says present or presence to you, that you begin seeing that it's the silence after that is showing you. The beautifully insane are dancing in ways where it's totally clear that their intuition is a greater trust in life where their expression comes from. So what that means, that person who's skydiving has a certain trust in life where he's going and pursuing that experience in that reality, right? So trust in life is also what you require when you become aware of yourself multidimensionally, but also through your sincerest gaze, see that no one is really themselves, and everyone is actually a profound moment of awareness. It's like that person you're acknowledging just as, let's say, a name, like you're acknowledging Sally or something, You see that Sally is it's not just a name. It's like once you go towards that presence, it's like you're becoming aware of how the being of another human being is kept. Once you observe it that deeply, you begin seeing that existential intelligence is non-judgmental. It does not judge. So if you're judging, that is a game of the mind. And when I say game of the mind, that means you are creating something that is giving you this view. Become observant of what you're creating, And so that's when you begin to dance. That's when you begin flowing and trusting your intuition, and you begin having days where it's as if the biggest risk is that you have no idea what you're going to do, and you're comfortable with having no ideas, and you're just walking comfortably throughout the day, just handling everything as presently as they come. I realize that is when the excitement in the eyes of those insane men who did great things without reason was that the temporal was always fixated on itself, because to have a gaze beyond it, that intelligence cannot be maintained the same. For you to get that sense of concept of, let's say, nirvana or enlightenment in quotations, you need to see that it's simply, it is different than what you're looking at. If you're looking at yourself as an idea, as someone who has an ego, it is much different in experience. You don't have time to not be sincere in this life. You don't have time not to be authentic. You don't have time not to be aware of the nature of existence. You must observe this plane. These are your dimensions. I mean, regardless of how many books tell you what dimensions you're in, you are experiencing your dimensions. Why do you need another man's voice to dictate how the walls of your abstract realms should be? You should not give people that much permission in architecture, because your architecture is one that emanates from your internal sense of observance of all that you're considering external. So what that means is that when we look at a painting, let's say in the Louvre or somewhere, we begin seeing that that painting is giving us each our own individual sense of what we like about it and how it inspires us. So similarly to how when different human beings look at life and they begin talking to one another and building societies and cultures, it's as if they all will always have their own individual view. There will never be one truth to capture it all, unless that truth is one that dissolves in nothing, as in there's no truth. You know what I mean? So it's like you're looking at all the things in your, environment or everywhere you are to kind of see what the essence of it is, and you're like, gosh, I can't find it. Yeah, because it's no thing. It's nothing. So guys, that is very important. And as we all dance with the beautifully insane, we see that their insanity was not unhealthy. Their insanity was one where they could confront their present moment, and it's as if like life, they were in that cubicle for so long where they got bored of just being that same character. It's as if their mind needed greater excitement, And the winds of observance will always give you a better sense of the body that is, in a sense, functioning. And I kind of see the wind as a great blessing of the universe, because you can think of it, a caveman just walking, and suddenly a wind comes and he gets a complete sense of his whole physical body. It's as if there's a touch, So it's like the wind was there to actually give awareness. So actually for me, winds are great blessings. Oh man, the winds of change. Anyways, look at yourself in ways that serve you. Realize that you need to take some existential responsibility. Don't think that you're not this idea at first. You are this idea. It is very real. External reality should be handled well. So what that means is learn the sciences, learn read as much as you want. Read as much as it excites you, and then after you've read it, prepare yourself for a journey. Think of it that before you pack on a journey or a deep, let's say, self-contemplation or something, go read a lot of stuff, have a lot of imagery and awareness, and then sit down and contemplate. I think reading sacred hymns or poetry written in very, very natural states is very inspiring. It kind of really just gave me quantum leaps in thought. Because we see that the lessons we gain from observing the love between human beings is much more better, and you'll probably like it more than the lessons you get from hate. Because when you see the lessons from hate, you see that reality can just be like that. Imagine you see some being suffering, and for example, your mind suddenly takes that suffering and it's like, oh my God, everyone's suffering, and I'm not suffering as much. What am I doing? When that moment comes, it's very important to see that presence, if it chooses a self, will give itself a value to then devalue itself. But if presence chooses to be selfless, you will begin to see that instead of being caught in your self-talk and looking at that person and walking away, you would immediately go help them, for example. Because your self-talk is not slowing you down. Do not look for self-talk, do not try to get rid of it, but just be aware of how you're present in this reality. You don't need any sense of thinker. You don't need any sense of a way beyond the way you are in now. It's all about how comfortable you are and the existential allowance that you envision in the self that is within all others. Mankind has had many ways to express himself from higher states of being. When I say higher states of being, I mean that, see, there's one dimension, let's say the horizontal dimension of reality, where, you know, there's heaven and hell, there's good and bad, there's individuation, there's who you are, you know. You don't need to touch this. You know, the ego is something that you've naturally picked up. You don't need to think it's you to then deconstruct something that's just abstract. You cannot deconstruct the formless idea. You must just become aware of how you're present in this reality beyond one where the definitions were your limitation, you know, prior. In many traditions, I kind of hinted at earlier, there were practices, many spiritual traditions, where there were ecstatic dances. You could visualize the shamans, you know, dancing around the fire, you know. Or you can visualize, for example, in another culture where they had dervishes, who they would just go and one of them would stand there and just be a guardian eye on the other ones, and all the other ones would go whirl into ecstatic states. You know, we see that human beings, even in one more thing to add, even in Tibet, you know, it's very beautiful. You know, it's like, aside from the meditations and the mantras, they also have dances where it's as if the divinity in life is communicating. What is moving that guy is not his thought. He is not dancing with anyone. Insanity is comfortable because there are no borders in what defines your moment of being and your awareness to it. It's as if you, for a moment, look at things and stop everything that you're doing. And in that silent moment, you begin to see that you have not done some things. And as you observe that, and you observe the temporal nature of this life, a feeling will come as if, have I done enough? And you will see that if you choose to continue to think from beyond this point, you will be troubled. You need to remain in the observance that a sense of self is relevant to the environment that needs an able sense of self. If you keep your identity before, you're never being that comfortable improvisation in the moment where everything is working intuitively. And so it is very important for you to see that, yes, this is life. This is reality. It has temporal aspects, you know, but in those temporal movements, there's eternity found. You need to see that, you need to get comfortable, you need to confront the worst condition of yourself and the best condition of yourself, and to be able to bring the apocalypse that you can envision for yourself before you go, and to just observe it and remain there and bask and see how that idea is not yours. It is simply just like how when we speak there's an echo. Just as how we begin to move, our intention begins to come into this realm of physicality, thoughts are projected in certain ways. It's like the echo which is our future, always knew that we were the voice. Dance with the beautifully insane until there is nothing more. Much blessings and namaste.